Bonjour, good morning. Welcome to the release of the Elliot Lake Commission of Inquiry. Bonjour, bienvenue à la présentation du rapport de la Commission d'enquête sur Elliot Lake. As is the custom with the release of most inquiry reports, Commissioner Paul Boulanger will make a statement. He will then leave and Commission Counsel will be available to answer your questions. Commissioner Boulanger.
Thank you, Steve. Madame la Procureure Générale, Mr. Minister, Mr. Manta, Your Worship, Mr. Hamilton, and members of Council, ladies and gentlemen, and citizens of Elliot Lake. 27 months ago, on August 15, 2012, not long after the Premier announced the creation of this commission, we met with the people of Elliot Lake for the first time in this very place. The mood was somber. This community was still reeling from the shock resulting from the collapse of the Algo Mall on June 23, 2012. Your wounds were still raw and emotions were running high. Il y a 25 mois, le 15 août 2012, peu après que le Premier ministre eut annoncé la création de cette commission, nous avons rencontré les citoyens d'Elliot Lake, ici même, dans cet édifice. L'atmosphère était sombre, la collectivité était encore angoissée et bouleversée par les événements du 23 juin 2012. Les blessures étaient encore à vif et les émotions encore à fleur de peau. That day we wanted to hear from you, both in public and in private, about your pain, about your losses, about your distress. And we did that over 2 days, and it gave us an opportunity to begin to understand how profoundly the events of June 23rd had hurt and scarred this community. And so began an organizational and investigative process that preceded our public hearings here at the White Mountain Academy, a monumental amount of work. Our initial investigation lasted until the end of February of 2013, and of the 550,000 documents reviewed by the Commission, consisting of in excess of 1 million pages, 11,000 were filed as exhibits, all of which are accessible on the Commission's website. The hearings began on March 4th, 2013, and continued through to October 9th, 2013, with only one 3-week interruption during the summer. All told, there were 118 hearing days, and then roundtables were held in Ottawa in November and December of that year when leading Canadian experts in the various pertinent fields relating to the subjects we were investigating generously shared with us the benefit of their experience and their wisdom. During the hearing days, 118 witnesses were heard, and their commission can be reviewed on 29,000 pages of transcript to be found on the Commission's website. I think it's very important to stress that this Commission, while created by the government and publicly funded, is entirely independent. It draws its conclusions and it makes its recommendations based entirely upon the evidence presented to the Commissioner by Commission Counsel during the hearings. It's also based on the submissions of participants and upon the advice it received from the invited experts at the publicly accessible roundtables. At no time during the entirety of the proceedings has there been any form of intervention or interference by government or by any participant or any third party. All of the Commission's funding recommendations have been accepted by the Attorney General, and my requests for a time extension and release of budgetary contingency funds have been granted without any form of reservation or exception. I was also concerned that the entirety of the Commission's work be exposed to the greatest possible public scrutiny. To that end, not only was the public accommodated and welcomed in the hearing rooms, but all proceedings were televised and transcripts were posted with dispatch on the Commission's website. All materials upon which the Commission has relied on to draw its conclusions were readily and easily accessible. All of my decisions, my interim decisions, were posted there, along with all supporting documentation. A separate room was made available for media representatives at the White Mountain Academy throughout the hearing days, with a live feed from the hearing room and with outgoing communications capability. Il m'était important, il m'importait également que l'entièreté du travail de la Commission soit passible d'un regard scrutateur, des plus libres. À cette fin, tous étaient les plus grands bienvenus dans la salle d'audience et de plus, toutes les procédures ont été télévisées et les transcriptions ont été rapidement affichées sur notre site web. Mes décisions ainsi que tous les matériaux sur lesquels je me suis fié l'étaient également. Des locaux séparés ont été mis à la disposition des médias à l'Académie White Mountain avec retransmission en direct de la salle d'audience ainsi qu'équipement de télécommunication vers l'extérieur. The Commission's processes have been completely public and transparent, and I've resisted all requests to make them less so, except in two very specific circumstances. I ordered non-publication of photographs of the deceased victims, and I ordered blacked out irrelevant personal information concerning the spouse of the participant, things like social insurance numbers and the like, contained in an income tax return that had no pertinence to the work that we were doing. I was also committed, as were Commission counsel, to the need for procedural fairness, and I'm confident of having achieved that objective through our rules and through the conduct of Commission personnel. I was not made aware of any complaint or expression of concern in that regard from any source. Commission counsel's conduct throughout has been non-adversarial. Their sole objective was to present the Commission with as much evidence as possible with respect to the issues that I was concerned with. Our report writing began in earnest in January of this year, and I'm pleased to tell you that we have brought it here with us today. It comes in 2 volumes in both official languages with a bilingual executive summary. The report is also available to everyone online on the Commission's website. Now, you will understand that because of cost considerations, the Commission has only ordered the printing of a relatively limited number of main copies of the report. The executive summary, however, is available to anyone requesting a copy here today. 1 copy per person, please, and we will give the Elliot Lake Library 5 full copies of the report for its permanent collection. Persons wishing to obtain a hard copy of the report, I'm led to understand, may eventually order it through Publications Ontario. The report is divided into 2 parts. The first part deals with the events leading to the collapse of the Algo Center Mall, and the second volume deals with the emergency response. The first part is dedicated to the memory of the 2 women who tragically lost their lives as a result of the collapse, Dolores Perazzolo and Lucie Aylwin. I met with their families along with council earlier this morning, and I do hope that this report gives them at least a better understanding of the causes of their loss. The second part of the report is dedicated to first responders, firefighters, police, EMS personnel who every day risk their lives and their health in the service of those in need. These are our heroes. Indeed, I was informed during the hearings that Fire Chief Paul Officer's nominations for his Elliot Lake firefighters for the Ontario Medal for bravery had been put on hold until this commission has completed its work. These awards should wait no longer. They are richly deserved. La première partie est dédiée à la mémoire de ces deux femmes qui ont perdu la vie à cause de l'effondrement, Dolores Perrizzolo et Lucie Elwin. J'ai rencontré leur famille plus tôt ce matin et j'espère que le rapport leur permettra de mieux comprendre les causes soutenant leur perte. La deuxième partie est dédiée aux premiers intervenants qui risquent au quotidien leur vie et leur santé pour protéger nos familles et nos collectivités dans le besoin. Ils sont véritablement nos héros. Effectivement, j'ai appris pendant les audiences que le chef des pompiers, Paul Oster, a reporté la soumission de sa recommandation des pompiers d'Elliot Lake pour la médaille de bravoure de l'Ontario jusqu'à la clôture des travaux de cette commission et il ne devrait plus attendre. Ces recommandations sont grandement limitées. I will not attempt this morning to give you a summary of all of the Commission's findings and recommendations. We would be here for hours and I would be trying your patience. The report itself is 1,394 pages long in English and 1,509 pages in French. The bilingual executive summary has 140 pages. And so I urge you to read the online version in its entirety. Those who don't get a copy of the printed version, those of you who find the exercise too daunting can read the summary. In the briefest of terms, these are my conclusions. The evidence is incontrovertible that the collapse of the section of the roof of the Alba Mall was caused by severe rusting of the connection between one column and one beam. But although it was rust that defeated the structure of the Alba Mall, the real story behind the collapse is one of human, not material failure. Many of those whose calling or occupation touched the mall displayed failings. Its designers and its builders, its owners, some architects and engineers, as well as the municipal and provincial officials charged with the duty of protecting the public. Some of these failings were minor, some were not. They ranged from apathy, neglect, and indifference to mediocrity, ineptitude, and incompetence, all the way to outright greed, obfuscation, and duplicity. Occasional voices of alarm and warning blew by deaf and callous ears. Warning signs went unseen by eyes likely averted for fear of jeopardizing the mall's existence, the social and economic center of Elliot Lake. Les preuves selon lesquelles, devrais-je souligner, bien que la charpente du centre commercial Algo ait cédé sous l'effet de la rouille, la première cause de l'effondrement en est une histoire d'erreur humaine et non d'échec matériel. Bon nombre de personnes qui, de par leur responsabilité ou occupation, étaient impliquées au centre commercial ont fait preuve de manquement. Ses concepteurs, ses constructeurs, ses propriétaires, certains architectes et ingénieurs, ainsi que les fonctionnaires municipaux et provinciaux chargés du devoir de protéger le public. Certains de ces manquements étaient mineurs, d'autres ne l'étaient pas. Ils prenaient diverses formes, s'étalant entre l'apathie, la négligence et l'indifférence, par la médiocrité, l'inaptitude ou l'incompétence, jusqu'à l'avarice pure et simple, l'obscurcissement et la duplicité. Les voix passagères d'alarme ou d'avertissement se sont heurtées à des oreilles sourdes et insensibles. Les signaux d'avertissement ont échappé à des regards sans aucun doute, détournés par peur de compromettre l'existence du centre commercial, du centre social et économique d'Elliot Lake. Some engineers forgot the moral and ethical foundation of their vocation and their profession, which is holding paramount the health, the safety, and the welfare of the public. They occasionally pandered more to their clients' sensitivities than to their professional obligation to expose the logical and scientific consequences of their observations. Some of their inspections were so cursory and incomplete as to be essentially meaningless. Others were fundamentally flawed because they were based on false assumptions or calculations. Some public officials simply lack competence. Others preferred strict adherence to and narrow interpretation of practices, rules, and bylaws, rather than conduct based on a meaningful interpretation of their spirit and their intent. The institutional and legal relationship between organizations meant to advance the public good operated, in our view, to disenfranchise the city's electorate and may have led to tolerating unacceptable conditions at the mall. Secrecy and confidentiality often trumped candor, transparency, and openness. It pervaded contractual and professional relationships, and even the municipal administration sought to cloak some of its activities from public view. Owners chose cheap and ineffective repairs or opted to sell the mall when faced with significant repair bills. They actively concealed their knowledge of the parking deck's condition from the city and from subsequent purchasers. The last owner, Eastwood Mall Incorporated, actively misrepresented the repair work it engaged in and resorted to subterfuge and falsehood to mislead authorities, tenants, and the public. And it is very difficult, ladies and gentlemen, to resist the conclusion that if any one of the owners, engineers, or officials who were involved in the mall over its 33 years of existence had insisted and said, enough's enough, this building will fall and will fail if it isn't fixed, 2 lives would not have been senselessly and tragically lost. Some did. Some cried out, but they were ignored. Les propriétaires ont choisi de faire des réparations bon marché et sans résultat et ont opté pour la vente du centre commercial lorsque confrontés à des factures de réparation importantes. Ils ont activement caché à la ville ainsi qu'aux acquéreurs postérieurs leur connaissance de l'état de l'aire de stationnement. Le dernier propriétaire, Eastwood Mall Incorporé, a activement représenté faussement la nature des réparations entreprises sous sa direction et a usé de subterfuges et de mensonges pour induire en erreur les autorités, les locataires et le public. Il est difficile de ne pas conclure que si l'un ou l'autre de ces propriétaires, des ingénieurs ou des agents impliqués au centre commercial au cours de ses 33 années d'existence, avait dit assez, c'en est assez, ce bâtiment va céder s'il n'est pas réparé, 2 vies n'auraient pas été gratuitement et tragiquement perdues. Quelques personnes l'ont bel et bien fait, mais on les a ignorées. The second volume of the report examines the emergency response in the aftermath of the Algo Mall collapse. Unlike Volume 1, which reviewed a span of in excess of 30 years, these chapters set out a story of less than a week in duration. Compared to the behavior of many of the players whose 3-decade-long involvement in the mall's well-being may be questioned and criticized, the emergency response cannot be faulted, in our view, for lack of praiseworthy intentions, engagement, determination, and not infrequently bravery and courage. During this response, however, a congruence of errors, some minor, some more important, led to a rescue effort that was no model of perfection. As a result, questions would long persist about the possibility that Lucy Aylwin in particular could have been rescued. As I pointed out elsewhere in the report, we learn best through experience, and a critical analysis of that experience is crucial to identify error or to confirm success. The lessons learned can then be transmitted to others to improve future responses. Dolores Perazzolo's death was unquestionably and mercifully quick, but the extent to which miscues, miscommunications, and mistakes prevented the rescue of Lucie Aylward is a difficult question. Some medical evidence supports the proposition that death came quickly. However, living for a period of time was not inconsistent with any of the medical indicia discussed by one important medical witness, for example. And tantalizing signs may lead to conclude that it is probable, although by no means certain, that she lived for some time after the initial collapse and might have been found alive had the rescue effort been executed more rapidly and more effectively. By 5 a.m. on June 25th, however, some 39 hours after the collapse, it is probable, again, not conclusively certain, but probable, that she had passed away. We will never confidently know the answers to these troubling concerns. La mort de Dolores Perezzolo fut incontestablement et miséricordieusement rapide. Mais à quel point la mauvaise interprétation d'indices, les malentendus et les erreurs ont empêché le sauvetage de Lucie Aylward est une question qui est difficile à trancher. Les preuves médicales soutiennent l'hypothèse d'une mort rapide. Cependant, l'hypothèse que la victime ait survécu durant un certain temps n'est pas incompatible avec aucun des indices médicaux abordés par un témoin médical important. Les éléments tentant peuvent pousser à conclure qu'il est probable, mais en aucune façon certain, qu'elle ait vécu un certain temps après l'effondrement initial et qu'on aurait pu la retrouver vivante si l'effort de secourisme avait été effectué plus rapidement et plus efficacement. Mais vers 5 heures le 25 juin, par contre, il est probable, sans pouvoir le prononcer de façon absolue, avec certitude absolue, il est probable qu'il était décédé. Nous ne connaîtrons jamais de façon certaine la réponse à ces questions troublantes. I heard from first responders who worked to exhaustion and yet resisted and resented being ordered to stop. I heard from community and first response leaders who were well-meaning, but often appeared confused about their roles and responsibilities. The decision to remove responders from the rubble pile cannot be faulted in and of itself because of the engineering advice they received about the very precarious condition of the building. But what should have been a pause to regroup and to explore alternative approaches should never have become a cessation of all rescue efforts and an announced abandonment of the victims. I embarked upon my analysis with diffidence and some significant reservation because I'm aware of this Commission's lack of expertise in emergency rescue operations. My training and practical experience, the training and practical experience of many of the first responders has been decades long. My learning period, as well as that of Commission counsel, has been brief and purely theoretical. And I am also conscious of the perils of judging events in hindsight. Choosing the right path in the thicket is easy when you can look down upon it from a high vantage point and a high perspective, but not when you're enmeshed in that thicket on the ground amid a developing peril. However, although hindsight is a dangerous tool when assessing past conduct, it is essential in crafting recommendations. Many witnesses, experts in their own right, commented in their testimony on what they and others should have done differently. Their views are important, their views are valuable, and in crafting my recommendations, I gave a lot of weight to their opinions. The report makes a total of 71 recommendations. I could not possibly repeat them all in the limited time available to me this morning. That, again, would be asking too much of your patience and your forbearance. Just before I speak about the recommendations, I merely want to point out that I am in error in the report when I state that some of these recommendations can be implemented by regulation only. In fact, I found out that they require a change in legislation when that error was pointed to me, but unfortunately the report was with the printers at the time that I got that information. And so the online version will be amended. As for the printed version, we will supply at cost white out liquid to anybody requesting volume. Here is a recapitulation of the important elements of my recommendations. First, there should be a mandatory province-wide requirements that buildings covered by my recommendations be maintained to a minimum standard to ensure public safety. If safety requires that buildings be designed and built so that they are safe when construction ends, surely it also requires that buildings be maintained so that they are safe during the whole of their useful life. Il devrait être obligatoire dans toute la province que les bâtiments concernés par mes recommandations soient soumis à une norme minimale d'entretien pour assurer la sécurité du public. Si la sécurité exige que les bâtiments soient construits de façon sécuritaire à la fin de leur construction, il me semble logique qu'elle exige également qu'ils soient entretenus de sorte à être sûrs durant toute la durée de leur vie utile. All such buildings should be inspected by properly qualified structural engineers. These inspections should occur when a building is sold and, at a minimum, at a frequency that is commensurate with the risk of harm from a failure to meet the standard. Information about whether these buildings meet minimum public safety standards should be available and in an easily accessible and understood form to owners, to the public, and to prospective purchasers. At the moment, generally speaking, information in a private contract between two individuals, a seller and a purchaser, is entirely private and not available to the public. I think that should change. The standard should be enforceable by a simple and practical process which requires that the responsible public authorities are accountable for the decisions and the actions they take. And those charged with determining whether buildings meet these standards as well as enforcing them, including professional engineers and municipal building officials, should be appropriately trained and certified, and owners and the public should have easy access to relevant information about their training, about their certification, and about any disciplinary measures against them. Ministry of Labor employees conducting inspections in response to complaints of unsafe working conditions under the Occupational Health and Safety Act should receive adequate training and direction to ensure proper inspections. In addition, there should be better communications among the Ministry of Labor, municipal building officials, and employers about issues relating to the minimum public safety standards. Some of my recommendations are meant to provide more rapid provincial advisory, this is in relation to the second part, more rapid provincial advisory assistance and support to smaller municipalities that do not have the financial means to afford the sophisticated systems that large upper-tier municipalities enjoy with a local emergency. Other recommendations deal with the underlying philosophy of the incident management system in existence in the province. And although many of these recommendations have their genesis in the evidence heard during the Commission's hearings, most received strong support from the experts during the policy roundtable sessions in Ottawa. The response of the roundtable participants, therefore, bolstered my confidence in their advisability and their viability. Many recommendations are aimed at making the emergency assistance process more efficient through more rapid response time, assurance of adequate response personnel, training in different rescue techniques, enhanced communications and record keeping, and adherence to and understanding of the incident management system through enhanced training. The recommendations also suggest looking at different approaches or models of emergency response in Ontario and elsewhere in the world, and improve synchronization and cooperation among emergency response organizations. Finally, I've also recommended that the government give an accounting within 1 year of the steps taken to implement these recommendations. Now, the recommendations I make are obviously not binding on government. It can do as it wishes. It has, after all, the responsibility of evaluating needs and competing values and balancing them against fiscal reality. Nevertheless, I cannot conceive, and the minister has confirmed that to me this morning, the attorney, I cannot conceive that it would have created the commission and funded its operations unless it was confident that through this process, substantial improvements can be achieved to protect the health and the lives of its citizens. I believe these recommendations to be relatively cost-effective, practical, reasonably achievable, and likely to meet with favor from a broad cross-section of society. Ces recommandations ne disent pas le gouvernement qui est libre de faire ce qui bon le tout-puissant, parce que c'est à lui, après tout, qu'incombe la responsabilité d'évaluer les besoins et les valeurs divergentes et d'en faire l'équilibre à la lumière de la réalité financière. Néanmoins, et comme l'a confirmé la procureure générale ce matin, je ne peux pas concevoir qu'il aurait créé la commission et financé ces opérations à moins d'être confiant que le processus entraînerait d'importantes améliorations afin de protéger la vie et la santé de ses citoyens. Je suis d'avis que ces recommandations sont rentables, qu'elles sont pratiques, qu'elles sont raisonnablement faciles à être mises en œuvre et susceptibles de faire l'objet de consensus d'une forte proportion de la société. Now, some of these recommendations may be implemented without incurring significant costs. They merely require a different approach to the way things are presently being done. For example, I recommend improved communications between the Ministry of Labour and individual municipalities. I recommend that there be debriefings after operational deployments. These changes merely require different mindsets, not large expenditures of public funds. Other recommendations can have important fiscal consequences. I recommend, for example, that the federal government reinstate not only its funding of Toronto HUSAR, the Heavy Urban Search and Response Team, but of all heavy search and rescue teams across Canada. And I recommend also, this is not without cost, the creation of a province-wide publicly accessible structural condition registry for all engineering inspections related to structural integrity and safety. Now, the Commission costs. I can report to you that the Commission has respected its budgetary allowance. The initial time allocation of 12 to 18 months for the production of the report was impossibly short. I requested and obtained approval from Cabinet to extend the delivery date to October 31st of this year, and as you can see, we've met that requirement with 2 weeks to spare. The costs of a commission are high, and in the case of Elliot Lake, were compounded by the length of proceedings, the volume of documents to be reviewed, and of course the distance. I believe that we've always conducted ourselves in a manner that recognizes our responsibility to be fiscally prudent. The report does not interfere with any ongoing criminal, regulatory, or civil proceedings or investigations. Evidence received can't be used in any such proceedings. My mandate forbids any conclusions or opinions on civil responsibility or criminal liability. I can't charge or prosecute anybody. that responsibility lies elsewhere. Our purpose of this commission is obviously forward-looking, and as I say, others are charged with the prosecution of persons they deem to be subject to prosecution. I conclude by expressing my gratitude to Commission Council, to the Participants Council, to witnesses, to roundtable experts, and to Commission staff for their assistance, for their support, generosity, and cooperation. And I truly have been honored to have been asked to lead this Commission of Inquiry. And finally, I thank the people of Elliot Lake, both at the personal and at the official and institutional levels. We felt welcome here in your beautiful city, and we've come away impressed and inspired by this community's resilience and by its courage. Your collective and individual sacrifices will not have been in vain if the recommendations made by this Commission result in a safer province for all of its citizens. Hopefully, this report puts an end to a sad chapter in Elliot Lake's history, and this community can once again focus its hopes, its aspirations, and its energies towards the future. Enfin, je remercie les citoyens d'Elliot Lake et au niveau personnel et au niveau officiel. Nous sommes sentis les bienvenus dans notre belle ville, dans votre belle ville, et n'avons pu être autres qu'impressionnés et inspirés par votre force et votre courage face à l'adversité. Vos sacrifices à la fois individuels et collectifs n'auront pas été en vain si les recommandations faites par cette commission mènent à une province plus sûre pour tous ses citoyens. Il est à espérer qu'avec ce rapport, un triste chapitre de l'histoire d'Elliot Lake prend fin et que la collectivité pourra maintenant concentrer ses espoirs et ses énergies vers l'avenir. So, Madam Attorney General, as per my mandate, I'm pleased to deliver my report to you. I finished reading it. I finished writing it. All you have to do is read it. Thank you all very much.